Welcome to this video tutorial on how to render sunflowers in VRay for Rhino. In this video I'm using this free 3D model that you can download from xrock.com. You can get lots of different models from this website, and this one in particular comes in lots of different varieties that you can use here, and you can also download in different formats. For this video I'm going to download it in the OBJ format here, and we can get it from TurboSquid by clicking here and then making a new account and clicking download, like so. Now once you've downloaded that, you'll end up with a series of files that look a little bit like this, and we're going to get our object files, which are our 3D objects, which are these files here, and we're also going to get a series of texture maps. Now to bring this into my Rhino file, I'm going to make a brand new file. I'm using meters here for this particular model, and we're going to load it in by going File, Import, and then selecting one of the objects here. Now I'm going to choose one of the last varieties, it's number 9 here, which is the kind of fully matured sunflower, and we're just going to hit OK to import that in. It might ask you to scale it if you're using meters like I am and not inches, and that should be fine. I'm just going to click yes there, and there we've got our object. Now when you bring this in, it will look a little bit like this, and to see the textures we can click onto render mode, and you'll notice that some textures have already been applied. Because the model and the textures are found in the same folder, Rhino knows to apply these directly as materials, and we can see those if we go into our render tools here, open up my material panel, and you can see we've already got materials for each of the main parts of the flower. Now this makes our life a lot easier when making these materials, but we're going to have to do some conversions for this to work in VRay. Now before I start, I'm just going to select my object. You'll see it's actually built up of lots of different parts. I'm just going to select the whole thing, and I'm going to rotate it holding down the shift key and using that x-axis there to rotate it upwards, like so. The next thing I'm going to do is under my render settings, I'm going to set my current renderer to VRay, as we're going to be using that to render out our flowers in this instance. With that selected, we're then going to open up the asset editor. I'm going to open up my frame buffer here, and we're going to do a quick test render to see what this is looking like. Now as you can see, this is looking quite fun, but it's not really looking exactly like the kind of flower that I'm expecting. You can see that it looks almost like glass on some of the petals there. If I just move this to the side and zoom in, you'll see that a lot of the materials are kind of incorrectly imported in there, so I'm going to need to edit them to make them look a little bit better in VRay. Now to do this, what we're going to do is we're just going to pause that render there, and again we're going to open up the asset editor and look in my materials tab. Now you'll find at the moment under materials there are currently no materials in this scene. In order to get these materials from my Rhino material palette here into VRay, we need to kind of directly import them from this place into the asset editor. Now we can do that by going into VRay. We're going to go into Tools, and we're going to go Convert Rhino Material, like so. It will ask me to select objects with the material to convert, so I'm just going to select all of the sunflower there, hit enter, and what you'll find is it will then load these into our asset editor, like so. And there we have each of those materials for different parts of the sunflower. Now these have all got kind of random names. You can rename them if you want. You can usually tell by the kind of image there what part of the flower this might be. Now what you'll find is as we cycle through, some of these are looking a bit strange. We've got this one here which looks like this yellow petals, but it's almost very glassy. The reason for this is when you convert it over, it adds a refraction setting to these, which essentially makes it almost like a glass material. So what I usually do is I'll go to the refraction parameter, turn that off. We're going to go to the diffuse, open that up and just check that that's the correct image, like so, and there you can see it's now appearing correctly in my view. As well, you'll notice in the reflection it's very shiny. We've got a really kind of high reflection rating and there's 0 roughness, so it's actually kind of very shiny, almost like glass. So I'm just going to up that roughness parameter and just lower that reflection color as well, just to make it a little bit more matte for the petals here, because they're not super shiny objects that way. And we'll do that to all of our settings and all of our materials here to get them to appear correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fast forward the video as I go through and just make those adjustments to each of those materials in turn. So I've now gone and made those adjustments, and we're going to open up our frame buffer again and then re-render this flower. And now you can see that this is appearing correctly. We've got the nice kind of yellow on the petals there. We've also got the green on our leaves, so everything's kind of coming through as it should do. And we can zoom in slightly to kind of see that in more detail there as well. So that's all appearing correctly in my render. Now we've got that working, I'm then going to kind of zoom back out, and I'm going to group this together. You can see all of my objects are sort of single elements here, and we're quite high resolution. So in VRay, if you want to have multiple copies of this object and use it across the scene, what's sometimes useful is to make this a proxy object. We can do that by selecting all of our objects together, going to our VRay All toolbar, and then clicking on this little option here, which is export as VRay mesh or VRay proxy. We need to choose a location for this, in which case I'm going to choose my sunflower. We're going to call this sunflower, and then we're going to hit save like so. Then we're going to hit the export button, and what this would do is it essentially exports that object as a proxy object. Now this will look different in my frame buffer, as we can see here, but if I hit render again, you'll see that that will appear correctly as if it was being rendered in the scene. So no change to the actual rendered object, only changes in the frame buffer. And this allows me to kind of keep my file size quite low while I'm working with these objects and have multiple copies of these without making a really sort of heavy scene. Now I've got one of these flowers working, we can also bring in some new varieties. To do this, I'm just going to zoom out slightly, go File, Import, and we're just going to load in number 8 here. Scale it again. I'm going to load in another one as well, number 7 too. And you can do this for all of the varieties if you wish to. Now, because when we load them in, they'll have by default those Rhino materials, we then just need to apply our new materials onto that. To do that, we can just go to our VRay asset editor, select these key parts of my model, and then just go through and click on the relevant texture that applies to that. So for the leaves, we can apply those in. For the lower leaves, we've got these ones here. For the stem, we have this sort of first texture here. For the petals, we've got the second one. For the center of the flower, we have this third one there. And for these smaller leaves, we've got this kind of back piece as well. There you go, so very quickly kind of applying just all those textures on to add it to our flower there. And again, as we did before, we can export both of those out as proxies, and you want to do this separately so they become two separate objects. So we're going to make this sunflower number 2, and we'll make this one sunflower number 3 as well. Now the reason we've exported those separately is we now have 3 separate objects, one for each of the flowers. And then if we render those, opening up our frame buffer here, you can see that those appear correctly as the sort of sunflower objects with the textures attached. Now as a last kind of run in this tutorial, I want to create a quick field with these flowers in. Now we've grouped them together, we can actually use them in things like scatter tools to scatter them across large objects in our scenes. So if I zoom out slightly, I'm going to just go back to my standard tools. We're going to make a flat plane here, and we're going to kind of set it across the scene like so. On that plane, we're just going to open up my asset editor again. I'm going to make a brand new material, and we're just going to make that a sort of dark brownish colour to act as my sort of earth in this case, and we'll apply it to selection like so. So there you can see we've got this kind of large plane there. Then what I'm going to do is we're going to make a new asset. We're going to make a scatter geometry here. We're going to right click and apply it to my selection, which is my plane, like so. Then we're going to select my sunflowers, go back to that scatter and hit add guests option, and that will scatter these sunflowers across that plane like so. Now if we lower our camera down here, we turn it on, you can then see those sunflowers are sort of scattered across that surface. Now we need to do is actually go back to the scatter, and we can up the amount of sunflowers, so I can up them to 10,000, and suddenly you've got a field of them across the surface as well. You'll see mine still look quite shiny, so you might need to go back and adjust some of those parameters, lowering down that reflection if you want to tweak the look of these and make them slightly less shiny in the scene. And often once you get them to this state, it's just about playing around with those parameters until you're getting it kind of looking as intended. I've still got this one in here. Let's get that working correctly. What we can also do here is we can actually turn on the sunlight in my scene as well. You might need to then turn down the exposure slightly so they're not too bright, like so. And you might also want to add in a sky in the background to make that blue. We can do that just by going into our textures, going into sky, copying that sky, and then in the settings we're going to paste it into this environment tab, like so. So that was just a quick tutorial on how to render sunflowers in VRay for Rhino and create a sunflower field of these. I hope you found this video tutorial useful, and if you want to watch any other videos on rendering, visualization and modeling in Rhino and VRay, please do check out the videos on the channel. Thanks for watching.